Hi, welcome to the Standard Operating Procedure, Cafe Tele's live broadcast weekly. This is broadcast number 11. Thanks for joining us. We're here to help you do better telecoms. And what we've been working on lately is automating your Excel-based telecom dashboards and recurring reports. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to very briefly review the things we've covered in previous broadcasts, and especially have to dig in a little bit in last week about pivot tables to understand the context for today's broadcast, which is about dynamic named ranges. Excuse me. Apologies. Dynamic named ranges, beyond being a pretty cool name, are really useful for automating. And we'll go into that when we pick up from where we were last week. So what we've done, I'm going to share my screen here with the, I'll just share the whole thing. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's the dashboard that we've been working on together for the last several broadcasts. And although this is only a little piece of it here, the basic layout is a title with the date. And then here are the most recent date and then the previous 11 months, so that we're always showing 12 months of data. And then here's what we covered last week was this get pivot data function, which allows us to take data from a pivot table and place it anywhere we want inside a workbook. And we get the minutes of use value for each of the last 12 months and the absolute cost. That's kind of a mistake because there should be a dollar sign there. And we don't need the cents since it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that gives you an idea. There's the monthly cost. And then we have this chart, which shows this data. So you can see, so we're at, are we good here? Yeah, so back in September, we had, here's the MOU is the blue, right? So you can see it dances around quite a bit. And that's here on the right-hand side. I need to do some work on this chart, yeah. And then the red, is the, just a minutes of use for each month. Anyway, let me continue. So what we did in previous lessons was this title is actually an automation. You can see it's a formula. It's not just typed in words. And this formula allows me to display the current date. And same up here in the title. It's a formula. It's not just text. And what that allows us to do is to take that pivot table data and place it here in our dashboard. And as we add data and update that data, refresh our pivot tables, it updates automatically everything. So as you can see, the most recent date is August of 16. And just to show you what we're trying to achieve here, I'm going to add a month of data. So here's September of 16. So this is the next sequential month of data. I'm just going to paste it there. And then I refresh the pivot table. Here's our pivot table. I'll refresh all because many dashboards are going to have more than one pivot table. And there's our September of 16 data. And our dashboard now, the most recent month is September of 16. And the title has changed. And even the title of the chart has changed. So that's our goal, is to make it so whenever we bring in new data, I say that specifically because there's many different ways to bring in new data. In general, I would say we're just updating the dashboard with the most recent data. But when we bring in new data, and remember there's 4 ways to do that I know of. The first is copy paste. The second is import a CSV. The third way is to, let's see, copy paste, import a CSV. Oh, the first way should have been just manually type it in. Just type in data, right? There's 3. So type, copy paste, import CSV. And then the fourth would be maybe you have some kind of automated query or an SQL or something that is pulling data from a database or a distant source, and it puts it inside your workbook automatically. However you bring in the new data, that's the update. You're updating your dashboard or pivot table, and then your dashboard or report. And then the next step is you click in your pivot table and you refresh all the pivot tables. And that's it. It's a simple two-step process. Is bring in the new data and refresh your pivot tables. And now, as you can see, we just did it. Everything updates automatically. So last week we talked about this in the pivot table. We talked about this get pivot data function. Let me close this. So here's the get pivot data function. And you do that. You can get that simply by entering an equal sign and then clicking somewhere inside your pivot table. And now you get the function. And then we took additional steps last week to make that automatable so that works in well with the dashboard. I'll link to the YouTube video of last week's broadcast. So that's how we get the pivot data. But I pointed out that there's some problems with this approach, right? So right now, if I show you the data source, change data source, right now we are down to cell G400. That's our. So you can see these dotted lines, the Hollywood lights there. We made our data source larger than our existing data so that we wouldn't have to manually update that whenever we brought in new data. Yeah. But what that does, because a lot of those rows inside the data source that we assigned to the pivot table have no data yet, you get these two artifacts. You get a row that has blank label right there, and you get a row that's actually blank. So although we have not yet experienced a problem because of that, today I'm going to show you a technique that's useful in its own right, but makes those two artifacts go away. And that's called dynamic named ranges. Okay, you with me so far? Can you hear me okay? How about, can you give me let me go back there, because I sometimes babble away and forget that you might not be able to hear me. Can you hear me okay? Have some more coffee while we're... Type me a message if you wouldn't mind, unless you can't hear me and then you wouldn't know to type a message. Oh, that's good coffee. Okay, let's keep going then. I'm going to share my screen again. And just the same. Okay, so today I've kind of gone in advance. I'm going to show you about dynamic named ranges. So in Excel, a range is one or more cells. So right there, I'm clicked in cell H12. That's a range. The range H12. We'll just say H12, right? It's H12. And here is a range. It's H12 to I12, right? That's this range, right? If I do this range, that's H12 to I13. That's this range right here. Okay, so that's pretty simple, right? So I can give a range a name. I can give a name to any range, and that's pretty simple, right? So H12, we can just call that range is 1. See, it says 1 up there. The way I create, the simplest way to name a range is select the range and then just click out here. Can you see that okay? It's up to the, to the left of where you enter in cell values and formulas, and you just type it in. So I'll give you another example. So here's another range, right? We'll name that 2. Pretty simple, right? We can call this one 3. So let me give you a better example of why that might be useful to you. So we all know that the area of a of a square or a rectangle is just the height times the width. So I've shown here on screen a square. It could be a rectangle, and the height is here, right? And the width is just column G right now. So if I wanted to calculate the area, I could do area is height. Let's say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 times, we'll call that 2 just to have a number, right? So there's my formula. It's, you could, 5 star 2 is a little better. If I click there, you can only see the formula up here in the bar, in the data entry bar. Here you can actually see it, right? Well, that's not very helpful. One thing you can do, it's basically a bad practice to embed, to hard code naked numbers into any formula, because it's, you might remember now what those numbers are, but next week or 3 months from now, you might forget. So it's usually better to if you want to use any naked numbers, put them in a cell by themselves and give that cell a label. And then anytime you need to use that naked number, click on the cell next to the label. So for example, if I wanted to say my height was 5 and my width was 2, right? My area would be 5 times 2. And I still get the same value, right? Now I don't have naked numbers. If I follow those, I can see, okay, B2 is the height and B3 is the width, right? But let's look at that formula. And again, you can't really see it. But up here in the formula bar, B2 times B3. But you still kind of have the same problem. And especially as the formulas get more complicated and have more components or more cell references like this, B2 and B3, they get a little hard to read. And if you have a really complex formula, they can become very hard to read. So named ranges help you get around that. So how about we name this range, right? Basically area, where did I have that? It's right, height times width. Wouldn't it be great to have that as our formula? So here's our area. What if it was height times width? So now there's my formula. That's pretty simple. And if I put an equal sign in front of it, it'll give me an error because I haven't named that. But let's try this. I'm going to get in trouble for this, I'm sure. Height and width. So you can see now I've named both of those cells, and it did automatically. Now those two references, height and width, appear right in the formula. So this is really helpful, especially for what telecom pros are doing. Is, many times our formula can be quite complicated, and it's like if you're doing a model where you might have 10 or 15 or more variables called out, right? It's much easier to read your formulas if it has those names embedded in it, because it's easier you just read the name. You don't have to keep referring back to the referenced cells. So there's the benefit of using named ranges, is you get formulas that are so much easier to read. Just to close on that, I'm going to do it like that. But that's what your formula will look like. And again, if you're like an RF engineer, you might end up with, well, that's a bad example. Sorry about that. Maybe it's it's a capacity, 10 gigabits per second, and it's a duration, a number of minutes, and it's, I don't know, 5 bits per byte or something. And you might calculate what's your maximum volume of data that can go through that. That's a really bad example. I apologize for that. But that's a named range. What I want to do now, back to solving this problem with the pivot tables. The problem with the pivot table was this one, that change data source is our data source, right? Many times I've seen telecom pros will define an area that's bigger than they need today so that they get data they're going to add next time and the time after that, so they don't have to change the data source every time they bring in new data. And what I said was that causes problems of its own with these blanks inside the pivot table. So we're going to fix that with a dynamic named range. And I think I'll just stay on the input data field, right? So what do we got here? Yeah, this is from a couple weeks ago. What I want is to find a name range that's just exactly that size. Sorry, that's just exactly this size, right? I only want to include data. I only want to include an area or a range that has actual data in it. Now, here's one way. Let's see. Oh, that's lovely. We're just going to call it range 1, right? So this cell is range 1, and I'm going to do some shortcuts now. I've gotten out of turn here. I'm sorry. This is an easy way. Typing up here, very easy way. Why didn't it get that? I thought I named that. Did I not name that? Do it again. I think I forgot to do that part. So this is range 1, right? There's a second way to name a range, and that's the way we're going to have to use to make dynamic named ranges, and that's with the name manager. This right here is called the name manager. I'm using a Mac, an Apple computer. It'll look different to you because the Mac implementation of Excel isn't really all that great. It's better on Windows. But here's my name manager, and I can't even make it bigger. It really is terrible. But you can see here all my named ranges. So height is on the named ranges worksheet number B2, which is right there we go. There's named range B2. It's my height, right? So again, back to the name manager. My width was B3. So if I find width, I scroll down, there's width, and it's on this worksheet, B3. So the name manager is an alternative way to assign names to ranges of cells. To define a dynamic named range, we're going to use the offset function. There's the offset function, and several broadcasts ago, I covered the offset function because it's useful for a lot of different reasons. The offset function has 5 arguments, and I'm just going to call this the anchor or the base. H offset, width offset, W offset, height. Okay, there's the actual offset function. So as an example, if this is my anchor, and that is I-17, and then my H offset is the number of cells height-wise or vertically displaced from the anchor. So if it was actually, okay, I-17, if my H offset was 1, that refers to this cell here, I-18. And same for the W offset, but it's columns, not rows offset. So maybe that'd be a better way to say this is row offset. and then column offset, right? So I18 is a 1-row offset. J17 is a 1-column offset. J18 is a 2-column offset, right? And then height is the number of rows inside this offset, and width is the number of columns. So if I had an offset of I17, a 1-row offset, a 0-column offset, and then 1 height and 1 width, that's going to be LI18. And if I do that again and do a 1-column offset, so this is, and this will be J17. I started at I17, and the third argument is 1, so it's a 1-column offset. So using offset, you define a range. The offset function returns a range. So back to my name manager. Let's define a range. Yeah, I don't need that. Let's call it range 1, right? Start with an equal sign, and it's the offset function. And my anchor is going to be, I said I17. So it puts that in there. And then I'm going to say a 1-row offset. 1-row offset, a 0-column offset, a 1 height and a 1 width. Too many. Oh, the comma. And the way to test this is click inside the formula inside the name manager, and it'll put those flashing, those Hollywood lights around the returned range. Okay, so let's try that again. This time we're going to use this one where we'll do a 1-column offset, right? So back into the name manager. And we'll call it 2. I'm going to start with the same anchor, I17, but it's a 0-row offset, but a 1-column offset, and it's still 1 by 1 is the width and height. And if I click in the definition, you can see it selected J17, 1-column offset from the anchor point. Okay? So that's basically, there's one more thing I'll tell you about this because you'll see this occasionally. I've seen people do this. If I do a third one, but if the resulting range, if you want it to be the same size as the anchor, you don't need to put in height and width arguments. Just leave them blank. And if I click there, it's still going to be, see, I'm 1-column offset. So what that tells you is that, what does it tell you? Well, I forgot what I wanted to say. Golly. Can you still hear me okay? Everybody with me? So again, what the offset function returns a range, and we're going to use that returned range as the data source for our pivot table. That's the direction we're going here, and I'm just trying to show you how to create dynamic named ranges, right? So if I come back here to the pivot table and I click in the pivot table and show my data source, right now we have hard-coded cell B1 to cell G400 as the data source for this pivot table. That's here on the input data worksheet. But right now, this is what many of you do so that you don't have to change this data source, the pivot table data source. You define a range that's overly big so that it will accept the next time you update data, the next several times. The challenge with that, though, is you have to remember eventually you're going to have more data than the range you've defined. And inside your pivot table, you get these blanks, which sometimes that's not good. You don't want those blanks there. So we're going to use a dynamic named range to select exactly. I'm using the keyboard shortcut there to select this, but this is exactly the range we want. Oh, it didn't give me this. If I start here, it'd be better. So there you can see I've only selected input data that actually exists. There's no blank rows. And if it goes to G343, if I come back to my pivot table, and I'm going to manually change that so you'll see the improvement we get, G343, if I see, I lost those blank rows. I have only valid data in my pivot table, and that's what we want. So if I undo that, can I just do that? Yeah. If I undo that, the range, it's again hard-coded to row 400. It's got blank data in it, and the pivot table gets these artifacts, and I want to eliminate those artifacts. So now what I want to do is a dynamic named range that can figure out how much data is there. So, not going to be clever about this. Let's just go back here and say, how many rows of data are there? Well, we cheated. We just did it. We know it's 343. So rows of data, I can do a count function. Do you know the count function? Count function is this. Count function just looks at a range of cells. And if there's a number in that cell, if the cell contains a number, count will increment. So I'm on row 343, right? If I just click cell G, oops, back again here. Let's use the equal sign. Enter an equal sign there so it's an actual formula. And then for my cell range, I'm just going to select cell G. So the count function returns a value of 342. I said the count function returns a 1 if the cell value is a number. Well, the first row isn't a number. That's a string. That's text. So that doesn't really work in this case. But since it's a one-row column, there's two things I can do. I know there's a one-row header, right? So I know that gives me the proper number of rows in this data set. If I go 343 rows from the beginning, I'm going to be there. And using our offset function, the anchor point is going to be here in B1. And offset, I don't need to use an offset. That's a 0. That's the row offset. The column offset, also a 0. My height is going to be this value. I can't do that because I haven't made it a formula yet. So it's 343. And my columns is I have the anchor is B1. So I have B1 is 1 column, C is 2, D3, E4, F5, G6. So 6. That's going to be my offset function. So let's pull my named range up. Formula, named range. I did all these. We'll call it range 4. And it's actually not this one. It's on the input data. And I want B1. That's the upper left-hand corner of this range. And then I can't use the arrow keys inside here because Excel will think I'm editing data. So the 0, and I know you can't see that very well. I'm sorry about that. I can't, when I zoom in on the worksheet, Excel doesn't make the dialog box bigger as well. Yeah, sorry about that. So it's 0 rows offset. The 1 is 1 column offset, but that's not what I want. Again, I don't want to offset from the starting point. We're starting at B1. And then here, I'm going to use that value, right? 343. And then the number of columns I said was 6. So that's my new range. And if I add that, that's range 4. I did something wrong. Oh, it lost my offset function. There's my offset function, open a parenthesis. And we should be good there. And there's range 4. Here's my function. And remember, I can click inside the range of cells here in the name manager, and that should highlight all the range that this function defines. So you can see those Hollywood lights starting on B1. And if I come all the way down here, there you go. So this offset function exactly defines the actual data. It's an area from B1 to G343. So that's what offset is returning in this named range. And what worked there was this part, input data L344. My count function. So what I want to do is I want to, just to make it simpler, I don't want to have, I'm just going to make it simpler. I'm going to put everything right inside that offset function in the named range. So I've just here, this would be, remember I did a count. So I use the count function, which counts all the cells in column G that have a numeric value. And then I add 1 because that first row of column G is a text label, and that returns the right value. So here's what my named range is going to look like. So this was range 4. So this will be range 5. Bummer. And here's range 6. So that's what my range 5 is going to look like without the external reference to this cell. So let's go back into the name manager. Range 4, right? So I'm going to go here. I'm going to call it range 5. And instead of linking out, I'm going to type in instead of typing it, if I click, Excel will make it an absolute reference, including the worksheet. And that's probably safe. Yeah. And then I added 1 because, once more time, remember, count returns the number of cells in the range that have a numeric value, and we know there's one more row that has a non-numeric value. That's the text label in row 1. So that's why I add 1 there. So now range 5, if I click in it, that'll be what I want. Works exactly correct. So let's try that now. It's range 5 does what we want it to do, right? So let's go into our pivot table and change the range. Okay. And see, we lost the blank rows. Remember those 2 rows? I called them artifacts. One row had nothing at all in it, one row of the pivot table, and one row of the pivot table had that label that said blank. It said blank like this. We don't want either of those. And look at this, it's gone, right? There's all my data and only data. So that's the dynamic named range that returns that. That's over here on the input. So that's this one. That's this cell. Well, there's one thing we can do to simplify that. I wanted to show you this for 2 reasons. One is the count function makes pretty much sense, right? It just returns a 1 for every cell in the range that has a numeric value. That's a good thing. That's pretty easy to understand. And 2, I wanted you to get used to the idea that you can add a value, that +1, you can do that. It's just, you know, between the 2 commas there, this is just the height argument to the offset function. And you can add a 1, you can add a 2, or you can add something else, whatever you need, right? Okay, so there's one improvement though that'll make this even simpler. And what I want to do is there's a function that will count any cell that has a value. It doesn't matter whether it's text or numeric, doesn't matter. It'll just count it. So that's the count A function. Sumya, yes. Sumya just asked if there will be a recorded video of this presentation. And yeah, after we're done today, I'll have to edit it and I'll upload it to YouTube. If you sign up for my, I send a kind of a reminder every week before I go live. If you'll sign up for that, you'll get not only a link to the YouTube video, I'll also send you this worksheet. You can have this workbook that I'm doing this in so you can see what I went through. That's why I keep, I don't just type over what I did before. I just add to it so that you can see the progression. So in this case, the progression is instead of the count function, use count A. Count A returns a 1 for every cell in the range as it's not blank. It's not nothing. And it's still column G. So let's go back into our formula, our name manager. Sumya, if you would, when you're entering your text messages, right up above where you type in your message, click send to everybody. That way the other people that are watching this video, this broadcast can see your questions. Send to everybody, because right now you're sending them to me privately, and you can do that if you want, but I'd really like for everybody to be able to see your comments and questions. So if I go into the name manager here, and again, this was range 5, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to do range 6, and I'm going to make this the count A function. And with count A, I don't need to add 1. And once again, I'll click in it. You see the Hollywood lights around the selected data, and I'll scroll down. And you see only the valid data, only the rows that have actual data have been included. So that's input 6. Let's come back to our pivot table and change the name again. Range 6. And you can see it still works. If I refresh, it still works. So one more time, let's add some data. and just because remember what we started out with was we wanted to be able to bring in the latest data for this report or this dashboard and have everything update automatically. And so here's my latest data out here. I'll just copy that and paste that. Oops. I'll copy that and I will paste that, right? And then I have to refresh my pivot table, refresh all. And that was October data, which you see right there. And in my dashboard now, the name of the dashboard is October. Here's the first month, and I have a total of 12 months, the current month, October of 16, and the previous 11 months back to November. And my chart also updated. There's my October data. I had a question, though, when I kind of got stuck here. 66. Okay, that's right. So that's the red value. The line is 66 back in November. 66, yeah, right about there. And it's 61 in October, which is, here's 62 out here. My units are all screwed up. This should be different. Sorry, it is correct. It's still over here. 62 is right here. Right there in October. So you can see our original goal here of bringing in new data, refreshing the pivot table, and everything inside our dashboard updates. And that's what happened. So at this point, I can tell you for a very basic dashboard, you have everything you need to create a fully automated two-step process dashboard. Who's pinging me? Somebody ping me. See what it is. I hope it's clean because oh yeah, it's just here in Excel. Sorry, it's here in LinkedIn. Sulan Wan, good. Oh yeah. Suntai here is wishing me a happy birthday. Thanks, Sulan. Suntai. Let's go back to Excel. So you have everything you need now. Set up your data. I mean, the simplest process is set up your data, create a synthetic field, and we're going to talk more about synthetic fields next week because this is a very simple example. I'll give you a better example next week because most of you are using, probably working with cell sites, and the equipment will generate data probably with a cell ID, like a numeric or some kind of unique identifier for any given site or base station and sector. But humans typically prefer labels, text labels like, Blue One or, Elm Street or, different names for the sites rather than numbers for the sites. So I'll show you a really easy way to do that. You already know how. It's lookup tables, but by putting it into our input data, it automates that step. And you can put those names right inside whatever dashboard you're creating. So that was the input data, the synthetic fields. Then I showed you how to automate the dates that appear in the dashboard. And I used the example of a monthly dashboard. Then I showed you how to automate the labels, like the label here for the title of this chart. It's actually right here, B24. I showed you how to do that. Last week, I showed you how to embed data from a pivot table anywhere you want it. And I use that get pivot data function to put data from your pivot table right inside your dashboard where you want it to show, where you want it to update. And then today we talked about dynamic named ranges. And in this example, you didn't really need to use a named range. Back here with the input data, with the pivot table, having those blank artifacts inside your pivot table isn't a problem here. But there are times when that can be a problem because it saves you a lot of work later. And I'll just leave it at that. I guess I could say one of the techniques for data visualization is called normalization. And I'll show you what I mean. Did I do my source? Yeah, I did. There we go. Data visualization is, so here's the dashboard that I'm kind of starting from. This is the full dashboard, and this was based on long distance data at a place I worked a long time ago. My team would update this every month, but this was our dashboard for long distance traffic. And you can see it's the same basic approach. Here's the trailing 12 months, and here are those values using the get pivot data function. Yeah. These are all absolute values, though. They're unit metrics like cost per MOU or cost per subscriber. They're unit metrics, which is good. But this one is the historical trend of MOU per subscriber and cost per MOU. But look, it starts at, see the label here? It's normalized because we arbitrarily set the values on March of 2009 to be a value 100. And every other value displayed in this chart is expressed relative to the value in March of 2009. So if March of 2009 was 100, you can see out here in late 2016, the value is 25-ish. And over a long period where the number dances around a lot, normalization makes it very easy to see that over a 7-year period, our cost per MOU declined by 75 percentage points from 100 in March of 2009 to 25 in late 2016. So this is a very simple way. I could show the absolute numbers, but the important thing is that decline. The absolute value I can show up here. Cost per MOU, right? Absolute. This was for DLD, right? DLD KPIs. So the blue, my DLD went from blue is, oh, sorry, this only goes 1 year. This doesn't show that back in, if it's 0.004, 4/10 of a dollar, 4/10 of a cent, which is $0.00004, if that's in the end of 2016 and that's declined by 75 percentage points from the beginning, we were up at about 1.2 cents per MOU at the beginning of this interval. So normalization is a great way to represent that, right? You don't need to know the numbers. You can see immediately, wow, 75 percentage point decline. Good for us. Okay, let me turn that off. Any questions? How about some questions? Like I said, I will edit this video and upload it to our YouTube channel, and then I'll send a, oh, you need this. Hang on a second. So here's the URL. If you want to get a reminder before I go live, click that link, and I'll just send you an email out the day before. And then after these go live broadcasts, I'll send you another email with a link to the YouTube video of the session if you want to review it again. I'll also send you a link so you can download my workbook so that you can copy from that. And once you've got the email, it's easy for you. You can reply to me if you got any questions. I'll be happy to help you with that. Let's see. Let's do a couple more things. Just for your own reference, I do this every Sunday at 3 p.m. UTC. Wherever you are, it's always this URL, always the same URL. Just show up here at 3 p.m. UTC, whatever time that is for you. Let me check my notes here. I don't want to have forgotten something. And yeah, you guys got lucky this time. I didn't share my normal disclaimer about Excel that, we're telecom engineers and most of us hate Excel. But Excel is probably the single most important tool most of us use. And although I don't do really hands-on telecom anymore, I'm not setting levels, I'm not changing site parameters, I'm not tweaking, Cisco configs. I'm doing not much hands-on. But as a manager, I'm doing budgets, capital budgets, operating budgets. I'm doing forecasts. I'm doing capacity planning. I do models models is one of that's something that Excel is really good at, is doing models. And a lot of the techniques that we're doing here will help you if you're doing those other things: forecasts, modeling, capacity planning. Anytime that you create a workbook and that you're going to have to revisit and revise that workbook in the future, these techniques are helpful. Anything that you do repeatedly, if that can be automated, it will just continue to get better over time, and you'll have fewer mistakes and you'll waste less time doing it the way you've been doing it. So using these automation techniques, it's just a terrific way to really build your career, because you're saving time and you're doing higher quality work. What's not to love? Any more questions? I think we're about done, unless you have any questions. Give me another question while I have a sip here. That says kindness. Kindness is free. Always be nice. All right. Well, if you don't have any questions, Sumya, thanks for your chat messages. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Just send me a chat message. I just want to know who was here. I can go in and check your email address. I think you had to give that to get in. But I'd just like to know who's here. Who's out there? Or yeah, so we are gonna, Sumya, thanks for your question. That's what I'm gonna plan next week. Is I called them synthetic fields, but a synthetic. Hey, Raulito, welcome back. I think you've attended a lot of these. You've attended several of these in the past. I appreciate that. Sumya, we will use the Vlookup function, because that's a real easy way. The equipment generates, statistics or KPIs or metrics, and usually it'll be associated with like a cell site or a site and sector, usually as some kind of unique identifier. And a Vlookup is a great way to put the text name right there. And there's lots of things. Once you're comfortable to use that VLOOKUP, and clearly you already are, once you can use a VLOOKUP to populate a row using a synthetic field in your data, now you can put those names inside your pivot tables, and there's yet another automation step. One of the things that has helped a lot is for a cell site lookup, so site and sector lookup, you'll have, usually you start with the identifier, cell sector identifier, and use a VLOOKUP to map that to a name, a text name. But then you might also, maybe that site is in a region. So you could associate all your sites with a region using the same lookup table, right? It's the VLOOKUP would change just a little bit, but it's the same process, right? It's pretty efficient. If you've got thousands and thousands of sites, there's a way to do that. VLOOKUP is kind of slow, and it requires it to be sorted, alphabetically or alphanumerically. And that's not always the case, but there's an alternative to a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. I don't know if there's time to show you that next week, but I'll take a look at it. And if I think we'll have time, we'll try and do that. That's the index match. Everybody calls it index match. And I'll see if we got time for that. If not, we'll stand up another one of a later broadcast to go over index match, because index match is very efficient. You can use index match as a VLOOKUP over a huge data set, and it doesn't need to be sorted, and it can be really, really big. The index match is really efficient for doing this. For extra credit, you can do that on your own. If you just Google Microsoft Excel index match, you'll probably find some articles or some YouTube videos that show you how to use index match as a replacement, a faster, more efficient replacement for a VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP. There's even an XLOOKUP now, and I haven't trouble to look into it. Okay, anything else? Okay, guys, well, thanks a lot for showing up. You've got the links there. Same URL every week at 3 p.m. UTC. You can join me here. If you want to get a reminder, click the other URL on pages.cafetele.com/go live, and I'll send you just a really short email. No spam, and you can unsubscribe anytime. But having that URL also gives you access to the workbook. And when you've got my email, you can reply at any time and ask me a question. All right, guys. thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you next week, and always be an action taker. Thanks a lot.